I am Lucinda, and this is How I Ally.
This speaks directly to what we want to talk about. In your case, this example is parental, and in my case, and in your case in the past, it's about caregiving and delegating a portion of the caregiving to someone else, in this case, a professional. And I think back to the notion of leadership, as caregiving as leadership and parenting as leadership, how we go about communicating and developing a sense of feedback to set the communication standards. So one of the things I've noticed, and I'm old, okay, I'm 60, so I am an old woman. So I was around when there were memos written on paper, typed on paper, and then phone calls and that sort of thing. But one of the things I've noticed is that text, which to me is a little bit more urgent, right? There's an urgent aspect of a text. It interrupts you, right? Most of us have our phone set so that we hear when there's a text, whereas an email is a communication that says, I've got something to say. I hope you'll open it in a timely manner, but it is not something that needs to interrupt this moment for you. And then I think it also, so receiving a text in the middle of the day from your daughter's teacher / therapist, certainly one that begins with, oh my gosh, not okay, right? A professional should not be starting a message with, oh my gosh, that's not what we do. But also via text, something that, unless there's more that she's not saying, I'm not sure this is text worthy. I think maybe this is end of the day, I pick her up and we get a recap kind of worthy, right? Hey, there was this point in the mid-morning, in midday where she was a little down or whatever. This is what happened. And we recap at the end of the day. Certainly, if if the urgency increases, the fever increases or whatever, then yeah, I think that's text worthy. And you decide then what you're gonna do about it. Are you gonna go pick her up, that sort of thing. And the same thing is true when we are outsourcing, if you will, an element of the caregiving of our aging parent, or in my case, my late husband. What is worthy? I tie this in my book, Care Boss, which I'm sure we'll come back to and discuss the fact that you are the inspiration for that book, that I talk about Dwight D. Eisenhower's urgent and important 4-quadrant model, right? There are things that are both urgent and important, and those, high fevers, that's urgent and important. A fall, that's urgent and important. A loss of consciousness, that's urgent and important in a caregiver's life and in a parent's life. But most other things are going to fall in the urgent, not important category, the important, not particularly urgent category, or the sort of last one of them all, it is neither important nor urgent. And, sometimes it's drama. Someone else is creating a sense of drama. And when you sort through it all, it's just like, oh my gosh, this is neither important nor urgent. But a lot of times it's like, oh, yes, this is important, but it doesn't have to be done right now. It's not urgent, or this has a time factor to it, but maybe it's not all that important. The example I use in the book is like your favorite, whatever, bubble tea shop or specialty drink shop is having a big sale, right, on Tuesday afternoon. And that is urgent in the sense that it's only from 2 to 5 and it's your favorite drink. It's not particularly important. You're not going to die without it, right? So that's a totally delegatable thing. You can ask your bestie to run down during those hours and get you that special bubble tea and bring it to you, right? Those are pretty much delegatable tasks.
Yes.
But I think your example this morning really speaks to all of the above, setting up the communication that says, when is it text worthy? When is it worth? And that's important to explore that with the other caregiver professional. in an open way, because we certainly don't want her making the mistake of not texting you when it was urgent, right?
Right.
So it's super important to keep those communications open. And in my opinion, the thing that really serves that development best is, whenever possible, giving pinpointed positive feedback. I appreciated today that you recapped this relatively minor incident at the end of the day, as opposed to texting me in the middle of the day, because this was something we could just recap at the end. And every time that's possible, to give her, or give anyone for that matter, that kind of positive feedback that says, this went right and here's why, then that helps them understand how to do it right and feel more comfortable when they have a question about doing it right. You know what I mean? And feel more comfortable with you sorting out what are the different tier urgency levels of the different communication types.
And so that's where the leadership comes in. That's where
Yes.
your boss experience really, I mean, because I would never think to I would never think that. I mean, even with my kids, of course, there's positive reinforcement. There's a tendency to only comment when they're doing something wrong, and I it's easy to forget to say, "Oh my gosh, I love that you're." I just said, "Oh my gosh." Um,
It's a
there's
habit. I do too.
there's I forget to say, "I love how you're sitting so quietly and waiting so patiently right now." I think a lot of parents do, but as a leader and a boss, it helps so much in motivating people.
Helps in motivating people for sure. It is, to me, pinpointed positive feedback. And I don't want to get overly corporate with a familial situation, but I look specifically, when I'm giving the feedback in a business setting, I'm looking at efficacy, right? I might say, "Hey, I love that you were such and such," but I'm also looking at tying that to how effective they were able to be, right? And the good result that came because they did this and this, and the specifics of what aspects of that action or inaction, whatever it was, what specifically contributed to that positive outcome. And trying, again, I don't want to overly corporatize this analysis, but it is super help. Human beings, both, I think, both young and old, do really well with the specifics. Saying good job is one thing. It's nice to hear. It doesn't help me understand what was effective about what I did. And the other beautiful thing about pinpointed positive feedback is it can always be done publicly, whether it's in writing and you hit a reply to all, or you send a note to the whole team that says, "Susie did this and the outcome was extremely positive in these ways." Or you can do it as it's happening in front of a whole bunch of people, because pinpointed positive feedback can always be rendered in front of other people. Feedback for improvement and feedback to sort of demonstrate something that didn't work very well, that's best done in private. It's never a good idea to humiliate someone in front of other people, because not only do you not know what it's like to be receiving that feedback in front of other people, but remember that as a leader, you are always speaking to the most sensitive person in the room. No matter who you're talking to, no matter who you think you're talking to, the most sensitive person in the room is taking that in and thinking, "There, but for the grace of God, go I. I could be being reprimanded in front of other people." And their tolerance for what they might consider a reprimand versus what I consider a reprimand might be totally different. And so they're freaking out, and you've either lost them as a trusted follower who follows your lead, who hopefully you inspire. You've lost that. And in a larger corporate setting, who knows, you've potentially set yourself up for being reported to HR, that sort of thing. So you're always speaking to the most sensitive person in the room. And I imagine, you've got twins, so right. And I
Yeah.
imagine they have very different personalities, or maybe somewhat different personalities. And so when you're being a little bit stern with one of them, you probably the other one is close at hand, right? And is noticing whether they care about it or not, but they're there. So you're sort of always in a group setting.
Yeah. It's so true.
Yeah,
Yeah. The second my son gets upset, my daughter will immediately start crying.
sure,
And then also in a more subtle, nuanced way, maybe more insidious, my son is always noticing how much attention I'm paying his sister. It's like an
sure.
attention economy. I had no idea that was happening for like a year.
Oh, yeah,
It's It broke my heart.
yeah, sure. Yeah, that's got to be really, really difficult. We just don't, again, not a parent, so I can't really speak to it, but I can tell you I've done plenty of stuff where I didn't feel like I had adequate training, and I don't think
Yes.
parenting is any different.
Totally.
Yeah,
Totally. That's like yeah, that's exactly what it is. Like, the fact that I love them really doesn't even, it doesn't even factor into the fact that spending a day with them is like a bunch of failures and a bunch of existential questions.
yeah,
Ugh,
no, I bet it is. I bet it is. But the truth is, I think you come back to it and you say the fact that you're with them is a huge success. Right? I mean,
right.
that is a huge success, and you just have to keep reminding yourself of that, because those others are probably just little, and who knows? I don't not, but I would even call them perceived failures. I'm not convinced they are failures, right? Like that, that in the big picture, your kids are going to grow up and they're going to know that they had a mom who was there for them. And that
Yes,
is huge. That is already a huge success.
because that's not
It's not a given.
nope. No, it is not.
Nope. Yeah.
Please tell the story of your book, please.
I'm just going to track a little before the second book to talk about the first one. So, my late husband was a hospice and palliative care physician, and he got a stage 4 metastatic cancer diagnosis. And I took care of him. I was the only, neither of us had kids. I was the only family caregiver. And I took care of him for 22 months before he died. And while I was doing that, I'm a self taught artist. I kept an art journal. And a couple of years after he died, the art journal got published as a book called The Hospice Doctor's Widow. And the book came out right as the pandemic was hitting, which took me online and finding out as much as I could about this new sort of space that I had landed myself in, somewhat accidentally, the caregiving advocacy space. I was doing all of it on social media, and that's when I discovered you and I ally, and was just fascinated and enamored with the incredible work you are doing gathering, especially young family caregivers. I'm a Gen Xer. I'm not of the millennial Gen Z generation. And you had really amassed quite a following and had a lot of good stuff to say to them, and still do, of course, but this was what was happening back then. And one day, and so my first book had been out for a while, and it was meeting with quite a bit of success, and I was feeling pretty good about that. My make a living job has been in healthcare for nearly 40 years, and in the last 25 of those years has been a lot of interim leadership in academic medical departments, in very large physician practices, where, especially those large physician practices, where I come in and I am the CEO, usually for 2 to 4 years. It's rarely do I get brought in when everything is grand. It's usually the stuff has gone way sideways. The previous CEO has left, sometimes in shame, sometimes not. And I'm very much a temporary leader, but I know the field pretty well. And I'm good at sort of inheriting teams and hopefully turning the battleship, turning the ship to a better direction, and then hiring my replacement and moving on. And so I've done that a few times. And so I have this combination of stuff going on in my life when I discovered you. And one day you posted on Instagram and you said, "Remember, you are the CEO of the situation." And of course, you were speaking to all of your followers who were these millennial and Gen Z family caregivers. And it really struck me that was abundantly true. Holy crap, they are the CEO of the situation. I started to think about my caregiving. And by the way, had also done was the primary caregiver for my mother, who had died of cancer many years prior to my husband's illness, and have since finished the caregiving for my father, who died in 2022. So I've now done the caregiving role several times, and I
Ooh,
have done the CEO role several times as an interim CEO. And I can tell to anyone who is listening, and while I have said it, while I do not have children, I think caregiving as a parent very much falls into this. I believe this. I have done the CEO job several times. I have done the caregiving job several times. And I can tell you unequivocally, the caregiving job is by far the harder job. Even on its worst day, the CEO job is nowhere near as difficult as the caregiver job. And I have gladly told other CEOs who have never done caregiving this before. So anyway, you say, remember, you're the CEO of the situation. I start thinking about this, start realizing, wow, yes, that's true. B, and this is important, I doubt very many of Lucinda's followers at the young age that they are have ever been a CEO. So I did a short series of posts on Instagram. I say short because it later turned into a book about how caregiving fits into leadership. And then I would say within a year of that, and I felt like I got a great I'm very much a micro. I am not on your level as far as influencer goes, but
ooh.
the small followership that I have was very responsive to this series, this little posting series of Caregiver as CEO. And I think you may remember we kind of I tagged you in many of them, and there was lots of, I felt, goodwill and collaboration in that effort. And then probably within a year, I realized, there's a book in this. There's a quick paperback, easy read, because caregivers do not have time for volumes and volumes of reading. But there's a quick, easy read in this, and I wrote it, and it's called Care Boss. And you were definitely the inspiration for the book, and I'm really pleased with it. Lots of folks use it throughout their caregiving journey, and it's powerful. It is definitely, because I don't have children, I will say to anyone listening, it is definitely for caregiving for an adult. more so than caregiving for children, but some of the things, and I say that because the first section is called strategy and resources, and I speak very clearly in the beginning of that section about how a leader needs mission and vision, right? You got to
Mhm.
know what your purpose is, and you got to know where you're headed or where you want to be headed. And
Mm.
I give guidance on how to develop your own mission statement and your own vision statement for your caregiving. But I also include what I think are good mission and vision statements, and they are very much tied to an adult who is ill or aging. And that's why I say the book is, and many of my, and all my examples, right, are my mother, my husband, my father, who all got fairly serious illness well into their adulthood. But there's certainly other parts of the book. There's a whole part about a team. The word team is I sort of say that with a big eye roll because people love to use that word when really they mean maybe a group at best. It's not really a
Yeah.
team. We're not functioning as a team, but especially in corporate America, we love to call the group the team, but are they really working as a team? I don't know. Anyway, so there is some stuff in there about sort of leadership in the family setting, but it's pretty tied to caregiving for an adult.
Yeah,
So,
I
yeah.
I remember something. I don't know if it was in this book, but it was something you wrote that was really powerful. I don't remember if it was this book.
It's okay. You can just tell me what it was and maybe I'll figure out
Okay.
which book it was in.
It's very it's what kind of what you're saying. Um, it's you were saying that I think it was about your husband that clearly he was well, I really don't wanna say it terribly wrongly, but maybe you were talking about mission and vision because you were going to keep living and
And he was going to die.
and he was not. Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah, I mean honestly that's a huge and that's you've hit on exactly why I say this book is for caregiving for adults because that's not going to be the case with children, right?
right.
Hopefully. But it is very much the case when you're taking care of someone who is very sick, who is a lot older than you are. Yes, I have actually references to that in both the books. There's a reference to that in The Hospice Doctor's Widow that talks about it's a one page and it says we're going through two different processes. He is dying, I am surviving. And and a lot of The Hospice Doctor's Widow, because it was my journal, it was just my own art journal that I then allowed to be published as a book. A lot that was done, I did it for self-care, and a lot of what was in there was he's going to die of this and I'm going to go on and I'm going to have to live with how I handled this, this time we had together. I became a much nicer person and much more subservient wife when he was sick because I wanted to be able to go on after his death and not regret getting into stupid arguments or
Mhm.
wasting the time that we had focused on seemingly small stuff that really didn't have a place in something so large that we were dealing with. And I certainly didn't want to look back and go, Why did we spend 2 days not speaking to each other about something stupid?" Right?
Yes.
Which we all do when everyone's well, but it's a tough shift when someone gets really sick. You really have to balance honoring your feelings because they're important, but not whatever they are. Anticipatory grief, feeling totally put upon. And my father, I did not have a great relationship with my father so the caregiving there was a whole different thing, right? Albeit
Mhm.
long distance, it was a little bit more task oriented. We have to do this, we have to get it done kind of thing. It wasn't, anyway, that you keep in mind the big picture, that he is dying and I am surviving. And yes, that is definitely something that applies to adults.
That is very important, I think, for the caregiver, right? It's
Absolutely.
very important.
Yeah. Yeah. In
Because
fact, if you, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you,
no, please do.
but if you want, if I can find it here, I can even read to you the mission and vision statement that I include in the book. The one that, like I said, I include how to create it, but then I also just offer here's what I think my mission statement was and my vision statement would be. Do you want me to do that?
I do, I do.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So the mission, which is right, the current purpose, what our reason for being is, to ensure safety, nourishment, hygiene, companionship, advocacy, access, agency, and care for my care recipient while seeing him for the person he is and not trying to change or fix him. So that's mission.
Wow. Wow.
It's
Wow.
it's a huge mission, right?
But yeah, and it matches the reality.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the vision is a comfortable, dignified end of life for my care recipient, a smooth transition from caregiver to griever, and an emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and physically healthy future for
Oh,
me, the caregiver. Because we get lost in the day to day, right? I think the caregiver of an adult has two huge transitions ahead of them. One is from going from life sustaining family caregiver giver to end of life or hospice family caregiver. I mean, that is huge because and the average duration for family caregiving has gone up to 5.5 years. That's the average. Yes,
what?
5.5 years. So some folks
Wow.
are doing this for 10 years. And you think about every day you're focused on these basics, depending on the disease process. What are his blood sugars, or did he get enough to eat? Did he get good rest? All this stuff. And it's pretty minute. I mean, it feels big in the day, but then you get to the transition to end of life it happens over time, but it does happen to the person who is now in a hospice status, perhaps at home. And some of that stuff isn't as important anymore. What's really important at this point is that I'm here and we're enjoying time together, whether that's just lying in the bed with my husband and watching something on TV and holding hands, or having conversation about, reflections about the person's life, just simply being present. The lab results are no longer important. At some point, it doesn't really become important that he loses his appetite because as the body shuts down, it doesn't need the fuel anymore. At some point, he starts to sleep the better part of the 24-hour day. And these are very difficult adjustments for a caregiver who has been, right, making
Yeah.
it happen every
Mhm.
single day for
Mhm.
years.
Yeah.
Um, so it's a real important adjustment. At the last section of Care Boss is a section called Beginning to Realize the Vision. And it is all about making that transition from life sustaining family caregiver to end of life family caregiver, because and a lot of good stuff about hospice and things to keep in mind with regard to hospice, because that, in fact, as my husband used to say, we're not going to get a do-over in this, right? Like, we're not going to get a chance to help this family with this person dying again. It only happens once, no do-overs. And so it needs to go right and it needs to go well. And then the second big change that I think a caregiver goes through after that is the transition from caregiver to griever, which is a profoundly difficult change. Like we said, years, right? And even if it was shorter, with my husband, it was 22 months, but it was my whole identity for 22 months was making sure that he was getting the absolute most out of the end of his life and that we were preparing thoroughly for his death and my survivorship, and that we were doing that kind of all at once in a loving way. And then he took his last breath. And it's devastating even when you're ready for it or you think you're ready for it. It's really hard. And I say I'm trying to train myself not to say something like when you're ready for it. I was very ready for it. Not ready in a way that I wanted it to hurry up and happen, but
Yes.
we had thoroughly prepared. Everything was in order pretty much for his death and for me to have a smooth transition to widowhood. I mean, we packed up our house and sold it and moved to a little condo because he knew I was going to do better in this condo than I would ever have done in a big house by myself. We did all kinds of things. Everything was set up, and certainly I had been through a lot emotionally, but it was still utterly painful the instant he took his last breath and was gone. And no longer, of course, did I have that big purpose of taking care of him. And there's some relief in that. There's no question about that. But mostly, there's just a lot of big grief. At least there was for me.
My impulse is to ask you how long how long the grieving process was, but I know that that's a ridiculous question.
It's a question I think we all get pretty focused on. We have time, right? That's what we have as a measuring tool. It's an objective measuring tool. It has been over 9 years since my husband Bob died. And that's a given. Like that's the calendar, right? We don't
Right.
um I can tell you that and I've lost my only sibling, both my parents and my husband. I can tell you that every one of those grieving processes was very different, has been very different, continues to be very different. And while uh, time time doesn't time on its own doesn't heal, but it helps. It helped me, and I think it helps others in so much as you sort of prove I proved to myself that I could get through the first day without him. And then the second day. And even when I was doubled over crying and thinking, I cannot possibly do this, I was doing it. And the other thing that really helped me that I talk about in the Hospice Doctor's Widow was instead of, people talk about one day at a time, and this might actually be good for parenting. People talk about one day at a time, just take it one day at a time. Well, you know what? When you are grieving, when you are, as we say in Louisiana, ass deep in alligators, right? When you're having that hard of a time, one day is too
Is too
much,
much.
right? Can't even do I'm not sure I can do the next 5 minutes. How is on
Yeah,
earth am I gonna do the next day, the next 24 hours? So
yeah.
what I learned, I read this somewhere and it at a really great point in my grief process early on, and it suggested flip that retrospectively. And at the end of the day, congratulate yourself on having gotten through another day.
Oh,
And that made a huge difference for me. Like,
really?
yes, just patting myself on the back and saying, good job. You did it again. You did another day. And, here you are. And you've earned resting your head on that pillow. I won't say sleep because I think sleep is elusive for almost all of us,
Yeah,
parents and caregivers, and I'm not even any of those things right now, and I still have trouble sleeping. So I
yeah.
won't say sleep per se, but I will say resting your head on your pillow, you have earned it. You got through another day, or just taking some breaths and being with the congratulatory moment. But that really helped me a lot.
Wow. I thought you were gonna say moment to moment. instead of day by day.
I mean, I
That's
certainly think it can help to, if you're really having trouble getting through a moment, to just, okay, let me just do this right now. It's right. It ends up back to kind of that important and urgent, albeit
yes.
mental and internal. It gets back to that. It probably is both of those things if you are really at that point of stress and anxiety. But in general, I because sometimes the other thing that I think helps with that's helpful about reflecting on the previous day rather than trying to look ahead to the next day is
Yeah.
it gives you a chance to observe, oh yeah, there were a couple of hours today where things were things were okay. I wasn't doubled
Yes.
over in tears, or I wasn't, having some catastrophe in your case with the babies, right? Like something I really did get to an equilibrium that was okay. Because a lot of times when you're going through something really hard, okay is almost the equivalent of great, right? Like we
Yeah.
strive for okay
Yeah.
and not disaster. So there's
Absolutely.
nothing wrong with okay, right? Okay is rock solid as far as I'm concerned.
Oh,
When
yeah.
people say, "How are you?" Not great. Well, that okay is in a lot of situations is pretty darn good.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that. I love that. Oh my gosh. You I I I fell in love with you, basically.
Likewise.
I think you're so smart, and I can talk about anything with you, and thank you for that.
My pleasure, Lucinda. Really. I feel the same way about you. I have admired you from afar for a very long time, and I believe in you.
Thank you. That means so much.
Uh,
Well, I guess it's time. Maybe we should do your introduction.
okay. Okay.
You wanna introduce yourself
Sure.
and just y yeah, say who you are and, um well, I guess you already did. You
I
already
just didn't
did.
say my name. I told you the
Yeah.
story of letting the hospice doctor's widow be published and so forth, but my name is Jennifer O'Brien. Yep. And
Yep.
and I feel very, very honored and lucky to be on this podcast with you, Lucinda.
Well, thank you so much for doing this.
Absolutely.
So we'll end here,
Okay.
and maybe we'll do this again sometime.
Yeah, we can do it whenever you want. Whenever you want. And I think this went is assuming the editing works out, I think this went very well. But if
Yes.
you decide that it didn't, then you just let me know and we'll schedule a repeat of some sort. We can do that because I know you started out stressed. You recovered very nicely. But if you get to feeling like, "Oh my gosh, no." And by the same token, Lucinda, if you decide, "Yeah, I really would like to have a conversation," I am here for you. And we don't have to we can do it by phone or video. I'll send you my cell phone number and you can call me if you want.
That would be great sometime. It
Yeah,
really would be great. Thank you.
absolutely. My pleasure. Yeah.
When I press stop, it's gonna take, like, 1 second for your files to upload,
Okay.
and then you can X out of the window.
Okay.
But if you X out before your files are uploaded, it will get
Ruin the whole
corrupted.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Then I
Yeah.
will I will wait.
Yeah, I'll do it right.
They're not uploading to me. Are they uploading to me or to you?
Oh, no, to me, to me.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So I won't exit out too soon, I promise.
Okay. Alright, I'm gonna press stop, so that will start